I'm Maria, and I will air my grievances about aggro.
I'm Riley, and I'm going to tell you how you can cast a turn 4 Ugin in M21.
I'm Cedric, and I'm going to tell you why Temur Reclamation isn't unbeatable.
I'm Corey, and some of your favorite pros foretold some doom.
All that and more coming up on this week's Advantage Bar. Hey everybody, welcome to another week of the Advantage Bar, your show for the shape of Standard. I'm Maria Bertholdi, one of your hosts. My other host, the man, the myth, the mustache, it's Riley Knight.
Oh, Maria, I've got some bad news. The moustache is going. I've only kept it. Seriously, this is not a joke. This is gone. By the time you're watching this, it's gone. I kept it specially for this recording. It is history.
Well, I feel very honored that I'm here with it in its final moments, Riley.
Oh, yeah.
We've also got a couple of awesome hosts joining us this week. Cedric Phillips, what's up?
I am, look, I got a haircut. My hair looks much different, but that doesn't matter anymore. I am traumatized by the lack of the mustache that's going to be here moving forward. I just go to Corey. I don't like this at all.
Oh, dear.
All right, Corey Baumeister, our other expert, how do you feel about the mustache?
Well, I mean, my expert opinion is I don't even know if I can go on with the show with how devastated I am that mustache is going to be gone. I don't even know what your face is going to look like, Riley, without that caterpillar on your face.
Yeah, that's it. I don't know what's going to... When I'm eating my soup, I'm not going to have any leftovers to sort of, enjoy a little, 15, 20 minutes later, a little snack later on. So it's all downhill, but... No, look, the moustache, it's had its time. It's got to go. So I'm going to go back to the old Clark Gable after this rather than the, old-timey prospector. I'm going to look back on this in like 20 years and be like, what was I thinking? This is going to be like the man bun all over again.
Wait, 20 years it's going to take for that to happen?
Okay, yeah, maybe that's optimistic, actually. Yeah, all right. Maybe
you might
20 months. Ugh.
Yeah, you might be able to look back on it tomorrow and think, what were you doing?
That's probably true, Corey. That's probably truer than I'd like. Oh, my goodness.
Well, Riley's mustache is going to join me over in the next segment where we talk about some news from the past weekend. All right, it's time to take a look at our news from the past weekend, and of course, the biggest news items were our two Players Tour events. We're going to take a look at the first one, which was Players Tour number 3, because of course, the weekend before this one, we had Players Tour number 1 and number 2. So let's take a look at Players Tour number 3 and take a look at the top 8 from this tournament here. We had 2 copies of Jund Sacrifice, we had Bant Ramp, a couple of copies of Temur Rec, Sultai Ramp, and Rakdos Sacrifice, but also a new deck in Orzhov Yorion. The person coming out on top here in the end was William Craddock with Jund Sacrifice. Riley, what were your thoughts from this tournament?
Unsurprising to see the top 8 landscape shift a little bit, reflect some of the new diversity in Standard. As we head into M21, which is doubtless to make some big changes. So unsurprised to see that Temur Rec did see a bit of a downswing in terms of its popularity overall throughout the weekend, especially in PT3. But the fact that we had old favourites, I use the term loosely, and exciting new lists challenging the established orthodoxy shows that there is still a little bit, there's some meat on the bones when it comes to trying to push, whatever particular agenda you've got forward in Standard. Good to see a bit of innovation, good to see a bit of creativity, but unsurprising still to see a deck like Rakdos Sacrifice or Jund Sacrifice, a well-established archetype taking the whole thing down. Because again, the power level of this deck, we've all seen it by now. It's very, very high.
Absolutely, and we are going to take a deeper dive on Orzhov Yorion in case you're interested in that a little bit later on in the show. But first, we're going to talk about Players Tour number 4. Let's take a look at that top 8. Temur Reclamation, a little bit heavier represented here with 4 copies. Bant Ramp, a copy of that, a copy of Bant Flash, actually, and 2 copies of Azorius Control, one of those in the hands of Hall of Famer Gabriel Nassif, who made our top 8 as well. The winner there, Akira Asahara, with Temur Reclamation, though, so of course, the past couple weekends, Players Tour 1 and 2, Temur Rec took down both of those tournaments. Here it only managed to take down 1.
And we're going to see the waning fortunes of Temur Reclamation. I mean, I say waning, it still put 4 decks in the top 8 of the second tournament, but as we crunch some of these numbers, you're going to see that this deck was certainly very heavily attacked and didn't weather the storm as well as I'm sure some of its pilots would have hoped. Its win rate did suffer, its percentage did suffer in the overall metagame. And that was in no small part due to the fact that it had a huge target painted on its head and people came ready for this matchup. We talked about this during coverage. People came prepared to beat Temur Reclamation. People came prepared to beat Growth Spiral. And that's why we saw Orzhov Yorion decks. That's how we saw this almost rogue Azorius control deck making it all the way to the finals. But unfortunately not able to clinch the trophy there. But look, a lot of stuff to get across from this weekend, even though we are at the sort of, at a turning point in the format with M21 coming, as we've already discussed. There's still a lot of things for us to get across this weekend, this week, Maria.
Yeah, let's take a look, if we can now, a deeper dive on the metagame across both of these tournaments. All right, everybody, we're going to take a look at the metagame now from this past weekend's Players Tour events, kind of take a deeper dive on exactly what went down. Riley, taking a look at this metagame breakdown chart, we're combining our two tournaments. What stands out to you?
Well, first of all, in the abstract, you look at a list like this, you look at a chart like this, and you say, wow, 25% Temur Reclamation, still really, obviously, an insanely powerful deck if so many people are playing it. We're going to get into what that win rate means a little later on here as we continue this discussion, but I think it's important to note that this is a downtick, but it's still a very high number. So Temur Reclamation definitely chucking its weight around at the top end of town, as indeed is Bant Ramp, one of the decks that has still continued to go from strength to strength post-banning. It's still doing very, very well, readopting the old Hydroid Crisis strategy there, along with Shark Typhoon, of course. But Rakdos Knights, last weekend we talked about Rotting Regisaur in conjunction with Embercleave, and a lot of people perhaps took our advice or got there on their own, whatever it was. This deck, as the third most played deck in the tournament, definitely marked a really important shift towards trying to beat Temur Reclamation with a very clear weakness, which was, of course, Big Reggie there. And as you move down, again, some old faces, some new faces. Jund Sacrifice has been around for a while, as indeed has Rakdos Sacrifice. But some aggressive decks also found their way into, small but sizable portions of the metagame, mono green, mono red. Band Flash, Sultai Ramp, more Growth Spiral decks also doing well, and you can sort of pick apart all the numbers that below 3%, whatever else. It's important to note that these decks are making a name for themselves, at least a little bit when it comes to metagame breakdowns. But the really important takeaways here is that there is an established hierarchy of best decks, right? And this is what really matters. This will be the level 1 for M21 Standard. You look at a metagame chart like this, and this is where people will begin their researches, begin their testing once we get all the new cards from M21. Temur Reclamation, Bant Ramp, the Sacrifice decks, Embercleave decks of various stripes. These are still representing the very best that Standard has to offer, and that's going to be the jumping off point for all manner of M21 brewing.
Yeah, and what's really interesting here to me too is if we take a look at this metagame chart and compare it to the metagame chart from the first set of Players Tours, really interesting stuff here. If you remember, Temur Reclamation just crushing everything, win rate 56.6%. That's absolutely absurd. And then comparing it to this past weekend's 47.8%, that's a pretty big drop there, Cedric.
Yeah, it's a significant drop for sure, Maria. And, if you think about it, it does make a little bit of sense. Players Tour 1 and 2, I think everybody knew Temur Reclamation was the best deck going into that a couple of weekends ago. And the thought process, I think, for a lot of players was, I just want to play the best thing. I don't want to be one of the people that's not playing the best thing. And I haven't had enough time to actually test a world without companions. And I know this deck was good with companions. So let's just start there. You saw a lot of that deck in the field for day number 1, and of course convert over to day number 2, and then win both Players Tour Online 1 and 2. People were still kind of massaging what a Bant Ramp deck needs to look like, what these aggressive decks with Rotting Regisaur need to look like, and everything else. And then in week 2, Players Tour Online 3 and 4 that we just saw last weekend, we saw that change, and I think understandably so, because first and foremost, I don't think everyone just wants to do the Temur Reclamation thing anyway. I think in week 1, it's kind of like, well, this is the best thing, so I'll do this. But then if you're a Magic player, you're like, well, maybe I can beat the best thing, or I don't want to play the best thing that I think everyone's going to be going for. And so maybe I can make some shifts. And we'll talk about some decks that players try to go towards, one including burglar rat, I guess, to maybe try to get an edge on the rest of the metagame. And, you do this kind of do-si-do and convincing yourself that, like, hey, maybe I can beat this deck. I don't want to play it. Maybe I can beat everything else but the best deck. And then, you're having all these conversations with yourself. And that sort of thing, and those conversations you can have, lead to less people, I think, playing Temur Reclamation, and it just performing less well overall because, look, people really wanted to beat it, I think, in week 2. In Players Tour Online 3 and 4. I think people wanted to join it this weekend. I think people really wanted to beat it, and that's why I think we saw that win percentage drop and saw, of course, the win percentage for other decks rise up.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that, Corey, because some of these numbers from other decks, like, look, nobody could beat them weeks 1 and 2. Temur Rec beat everybody as far as win rate is concerned. Taking a look at this weeks 3 and 4, a bunch of decks did better. So my question to you is, which decks, figured it out and why?
The decks that I think figured it out were, to start, Bant Ramp, actually, I think is quite favored against Temur Reclamation if you can find the right build. Luis Del Toro, who did pretty well in PT2, I believe, found a really good list that people started to incorporate to answer these Temur Reclamation decks. And, it was a very strong way to beat this deck, as well as Rotting Regisaur that we were talking about. A lot of Rakdos decks figured out that Aether Gust were a card that was in high numbers, not only in the Bant Ramp decks, but also in the Temur Reclamation decks to be able to, answer each other and to answer other Temur Reclamation matches. And Rotting Regisaur does not care too much about that, or Scorching Dragonfire, stuff like that. It was really proven that the 7/6 was really good at getting across the finish line against Temur Reclamation. And honestly, we saw a lot of numbers from these Rakdos decks, whether it was Rakdos Knights slapping an Embercleave on it, or just Rakdos Sacrifice, that were either pre-sideboarded to beat Temur Reclamation with main deck Rotting Regisaur, and then taking those out when they had to play against decks that were really good against aggro, like Bant Ramp. But the thing that I thought was the most interesting this weekend was it was really tough to beat both of those decks, Bant Ramp and Temur Reclamation. A lot of the cards are very different when you approach them, so it was all really focused on your pairings. If you tried to beat Temur Reclamation and you played against it all the time, half of your matches or whatever, you had a good tournament. But if you split and you wanted to beat Temur Reclamation, you kept playing against Bant Ramp, you probably got eliminated pretty early on in the competition.
And what's interesting, too, is the winner here, Corey, Azorius Control with 61.9% win rate. I was seeing Gabe Nassif in the chat, and he's like, my bad matchup is the mirror.
Yeah, that's a Nassif thing to say, that's for sure. And he plays Azorius Control, whether or not it's good or bad. So he's either just going to nail it when it comes to a metagame, or maybe it's going to be really, really bad when he doesn't.
One of the top decks that was talked about this past weekend was, of course, Orzhov Yorion, which is kind of sprung onto the scene. But Cedric, it looks like Temur Reclamation was not necessarily the deck that it had in its sights. So what was this deck all about, and what was it trying to do?
Well, the thought process here, in my estimation, is, in metagames where there's clearly a best deck, you try to find a deck sometimes in certain metagames that beats every other deck but the best deck, and then maybe you hope you get lucky when you get paired against the best deck, right? The deck that this Orzhov Yorion deck was pretty bad against Temur Reclamation, but it was really good against everything else. So, as Corey mentioned, in some aspects, a tournament like Players Tour Online 3 and 4 can come down to what you're paired against. If you get paired against your Bant Ramps, the aggressive decks, the decks that are trying to prey on Temur Reclamation, you may look like a genius. And again, it can happen where Temur Reclamation take a couple mulligans, things don't shake out the way that they're hoping for. You can maybe, win. I don't think it's like your 10% chance to win. But if your goal is, I'm going to try to sidestep what's going on, I'm going to try to beat everything else, and maybe I get a little lucky in my Temur Rec matchups, that's a recipe for success. We've seen it over Magic's competitive history. And for a couple players, we have seen that work out. Now, the card quality in this deck, well, it's a little low. I don't have anything against Burglar Rat. I don't want you to think that I do. And the other Ravenous Rats variants, like, I can't even think of the name of it, the Fur Lurker or something that has the Shame Lurker ability.
Yeah.
The Fen Lurker. I mean, it's so bad I don't even know the name of the card, and I know the name of most cards. Because it's literally my job, know the name of most cards. But look, the people that play this deck, Seth Manfield, Ben Stark, Brad Nelson, like all Hall of Fame level Magic players, so they didn't do this on accident. And Corey, obviously, you're brothers with Brad, so I'm sure you know what was going on there because I don't.
Yeah, Corey, let us know a little bit of what was running through his mind making this wild new deck.
Well, I think they just narrowed it down to that Burglar Rat was the best card in Standard, and they finally found a home for it. And
there's 8 of them.
And there's 8 of them.
Perfect.
We can just go the distance with it. No, but this was another case of targeting either Wilderness Reclamation or targeting Bant Ramp, in my opinion. And this was a deck that, against Temur Reclamation, like Cedric was saying, not great. You know, it wasn't horribly bad, but the problem with the matchup against Temur Reclamation from the Orzhov Yorion deck was the fact that whenever they played an explosion for like 6, you know, you were just kind of out of it. So you could rip apart their hand early, but eventually when they drew one of these really high impact spells, they were going to run away so much that you can't really catch up by like saying, okay, I'm going to get you with that Burglar Rat this time and narrow your hand from 6 down to 5 cards. It doesn't matter. But when you play that on turn 2 and you're able to stop their mana from developing, so they have to choose between keeping Expansion Explosion in their hand or Wilderness Reclamation, that's when you can get the games if they can stop drawing, you know, if they don't get lucky off the top of their deck. But what this deck really did well was absolutely destroy Bant Ramp. And what Brad and Efro and Ben and Seth all had in mind was that Bant Ramp was actually going to be the #1 played deck this weekend, despite how well Temur Reclamation did the weeks before. And they were right. For PT3, the one that they were playing in, the most of them, they were correct in that assumption that people were going to adopt Bant Ramp to beat Temur Reclamation, and then they were going to beat that deck. But they also had really good matchups against any aggressive decks, any Jund Sacrifice deck like that. So if they were able to have good pairings, they were going to do well, like Seth. I was watching a lot of Seth's matches, and he was always playing against Gutterbones, or he was playing against Hydroid Krasis. And then I look over at Brad's matches, and he just played Temur Rec Round 2, Temur Rec Round 3, Temur Rec Round 4, and he was out of the tournament by round 5. So, you know, flipping the coin a little bit there and hoping for the best. And, you know, some people were not so lucky.
Well, there is a look at the Players Tour events from this past weekend. And of course, we have the Players Tour final to look forward to happening the 25th and 26th of July, which is all of the players who had records of 11-4 or better. So that is the best of the best, sir, with honors coming up next month. We're not going to want to miss that. But yeah, we are kind of sunsetting here on the current standard format. M21 is out. It is being added into
Maria,
standard.
What movie is that from?
Is
that from
are you
Major
serious?
Pain? Yes.
No! It's from Men in Black.
Oh, you're right.
Okay.
Keep going. I'm sorry.
A classic. I love it.
had to know.
Yeah, Men in Black. I love that movie. So I've been waiting for a while to get that joke in there. But yeah, we're saying goodbye to this format now. We've got new cards to play with. But I think we learned a lot of lessons about the standard format, and we're going to talk about that coming up here.
Well, as we move towards M21 coming out, and as we again reinvigorate or refresh the standard format with a new batch of cards, it's an opportunity for us to look back on the months, the weeks that we've had with Ikoria, and some of the huge tumultuous changes that have sort of blown their way through the standard format. Of course, the headline act was the companions from Ikoria, and it proved that, well, who knew? Having 8 cards in your opening hand was a little bit better than having 7. Actually, no, a lot better. Not just a little better. It ended up being far too much better, and so we had a consequent rule change to deal with that. In addition, of course, to the banning of both Fires of Invention and Agent of Treachery. So certainly this format has had some ups and downs. It's certainly seen a lot of shake-ups, and companions, I think, have definitely headlined that again as the marquee cards from Ikoria that ended up being just a little bit too good as they were printed. But since then, we've had standard continue to develop, continue to change. But Corey, one of the things that has really stood out to me is that this, I would say, is potentially one of the most powerful standard formats that I can ever remember. This is one of the most powerful standard formats we've ever seen.
Oh yeah, no, I am 100% in agreement that this is one of the most powerful standards. The thing with companions that made this so insanely powerful was not only the 8 cards, because obviously 1 extra card is going to be insane, but the fact that they filled the curve perfectly in the decks that they were trying to play around. So I think that's why Fires was so good. The Jeskai Luka deck was so good because you went Fires into Yorion almost every time, and we noticed how insane that play was fires into something, into Yorion, into something else. And, you know, the Lurrus decks did the same thing, where they had a perfect curve into it, and it was the card that every deck was building around, was these companions, and it proved to just be way too good. And, you know, maybe got fires and Agent Band when before Yorion, I don't think they were insane. Like, you know, Jeskai Fires was a very good deck, a very powerful deck that did a lot of good things at Worlds this last year, but it wasn't anything that needed to be banned, in my opinion. But with Yorion, you found a shell that was just, you know, way too treacherous, if I may drop that pun.
Well, Corey, as well, the other thing that we saw was companions sort of shining a new light on the power level of the format. Not just the companions themselves, but we saw 80 card decks filled out with Yorion effortlessly because of the depth and the power of the card pool, Corey.
Yeah, that was the craziest thing, too. At the start of Ikoria, you know, pre-Ikoria, everyone always had the general consensus that you play 60 cards. Even if you play 61, you better have a good reason for playing that extra card. Because you post a 61 card deck on Twitter, you're going to get eaten alive before the days of Yorion. And, you know, now I even saw a tweet like 3 days ago from Seth Manfield where he was saying, you know what, even if I'm not going to play Yorion, I still think I might try to add a couple more cards just to play all these powerful cards that are in Standard right now. And it just shows how crazy the mold is being broken. And it really makes you think about Magic in a different way, that you know, you can really just break the mold and not always have to go into what is the status quo of the normal things that we've seen with Standard pre-Ikoria.
The status quo certainly was shaken up, and Maria, another area where we saw a significant challenge to the orthodoxy of Standard is the kind of suppression of aggro decks. We haven't seen aggressive decks flourish. We haven't seen them take their normal place in a fluid, dynamic scissors paper rock metagame. I'm interested to hear your thoughts. I mean, you're a rusted on aggro player. It's been a rough couple of months for anyone who just wants to get them dead real quick.
Yeah, you know, we haven't had an aggressive deck take the top title of any tournament as far as I can remember in recent memory here. And it is depressing, Riley. I thought about this. You know, I have a notebook here. I wrote down all the different aggro decks that I've been trying here. Okay, mono black. Well, that was good for a while, but it wasn't good enough. Cross that off. Let's see. Rakdos Knights, I made Mythic with that deck, but nobody ever won a tournament with it, so cross that off. Gruul, that was fun for a while. Nope, no good. Mono red, I mean, that deck's been crushing for a long time. No, not good enough here, turns out. Let's see. Oh, I even put humans on this list, because yes, I did try obs on humans. It's terrible. Don't do what I did. Mono green, you know, that did have some play. We talked about it a lot on this show, but it hasn't ever quite gotten there. What the heck is going on, you know? We say you just play an aggressive deck to beat Temur Reclamation, but there was always another hammer ready to knock it back down, and that's sacrifice decks, right? And so poor little aggressive decks, I don't ever think got their real moment to shine because of a bunch of different reasons, but it just never happened. M21, will you save us?
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was a question of if you don't lose the Shadow of the Sky, you usually lose to Mayhem Devil, and a lot of the early starts for you know, the growth spiral decks just left you in the dust before you had a chance to really to get them dead as quick as you'd want to. So it's been a difficult couple of weeks and difficult couple of months for aggro. Maybe things change in the future. We will see. We can but hope. Another thing, Cedric, I'm interested to get your take on this. This was something that was pointed out to us here. The fact that a lot of the cards that are defining the Standard metagame, the landscape of the format right now, are effectively modal. For example, I mean, the very clear example, Expansion Explosion, which is one of the most modal cards you can get. You can use it to counter stuff, copy stuff, remove creatures, remove planeswalkers, remove your opponent, draw cards. It does it all. But even with adventure cards, which are usually hybrid removal spells / creatures, or even cycling cards, which can be an enormous threat like Shark Typhoon or an efficiently costed creature, the flexibility of Ikoria Standard has been one of its defining features, Cedric.
Well, you know, Maria spoke to the lack of aggressive decks, and well, part of the reason I think there's a couple of reasons for that. And I'm touching on this because you're talking about the power and the modality of some of these cards. Aggressive decks don't really have that. And that's why I think we saw so many growth spiral decks and so many people just going, you know what, I'm going to play a breeding pool deck. You mentioned Shark Typhoon. Well, that card scales however the heck you want it to. Do you want it? Well, Marshall, we're not going to hardcast it. Okay, I'm sorry. But how do you want to cycle this? Well, that's going to vary on the kind of game that you're playing. You might have 8 mana on the battlefield and maybe you want to cycle it for 3 or for 4, maybe for the full amount. Maybe you want to leave some mana up for a counter spell or to cast Petty Theft. Who knows? So that card, which has had such a huge impact against Planeswalkers, there's a sliding scale of how you just want to use that card, because sometimes you may just cycle it on turn 2 because you need to hit your 3rd land drop, but in a perfect world, you're cycling it for 800 and killing your opponent the next turn. You mentioned Expansion Explosion. The expansion I have for this card, far too many times have I been on the receiving end of Flame Sweep, expansion it, kill all my green creatures. It's really annoying, especially because I have no spells to copy. So for that to happen is super annoying, but that card is super flexible because a lot of people think of that card as just Explosion, but also Explosion has a sliding scale of how much you're supposed to cast it for. So, if you think about a land, Blast Zone, how many counters am I supposed to put this at? Do I just leave it on 1 and then when a 3-mana threat comes around, like Teferi or Narset, then I put it up to 3? Am I supposed to leave it at a sweet spot of 2 so it's flexible, but then I'm doing worse against 1s? Like, that card has a lot of flexibility. And that's not even getting into the adventure cards, as you mentioned, how you're supposed to use those, how you're supposed to use that stupid Oven and Cauldron Familiar and everything going on with that deck, and every decision you have to make with that deck, and that's why, Canister is the master of that deck, because the decision trees with Trail of Crumbs, get that out of here. I've got Yorvo and Questing Beast attack. I don't want to know how to figure out how to do that stuff. But, that's this standard format. The power level was through the roof. Some cards got eliminated as we went, of course, and the companion mechanic got nerfed, but the flexibility and the decision-making of all the cards that were available in this format really separated the best from the very best, and that's why you saw a lot of the same decks do pretty well, and honestly, a lot of the same people do really well in this standard format.
It makes so much sense now that Cedric puts it that way. Bant Ramp and Temur Reclamation both have that versatility, whether it's Brazen Borrow in both of them, Shark Typhoon, Expansion Explosion in one, or just, Uro in both of them. It makes sense because playing against those decks, it's so hard to figure out exactly what to play around, because they can do so many different things with these cards. So I think that makes sense why they're at the top of the standings with Bant Ramp and Temur Rec.
But the other important thing to note here is, the other half of Cedric's point is the same people were doing really well. Yeah. This has been a very decision-intensive, a very skill-testing standard format. We haven't seen, perhaps, the fluidity, the dynamism with a lot of decks sort of cycling through. It hasn't necessarily had a best deck every week, but the best players in the world have been consistently rewarded because of their ability to maneuver through difficult and complicated situations with flexible modal cards. So I think as a defining feature of the standard format, we have seen aggro decks at an nadir. They haven't done well. We have seen flexible modal cards powering out a very, very deep card pool of very powerful options. And this means that, whether this standard format sticks around, whether it is built upon or whether it is completely refreshed and renewed by M21, we've certainly had a very unique time over the last couple of weeks and months with companions, with the power level, with modal cards and what have you. Ikoria Standard has been a standard to remember, and it's very exciting now for us to think about what lies in future for us with the onset of Core Set 2021.
Now it's time to look ahead with the release of M21. We've talked a lot on the show about where we're at, but where do we go from here now? Corey, I'm going to start with you. Where do we go from here when it comes to M21?
Well, first of all, whenever a new set comes out, it's like magical Christmas land, right? Because a refresh to the format is exactly what we need. And I think step one from where to go from here is when you build your decks with M21 cards, either including them into new strategies or reinvigorating something else, you really want to be proactive and hyper-aggressive to be able to beat Temur Reclamation. That is step number one, because people are still going to be the bad guys or girls and just load that deck up, and you're going to have to still beat it. So I want to be either really aggressive or really mix it up and try a breeding pool growth spiral strategy and play some new cards with it. I know this is crazy. It's two cards that don't really work that well together, but I think with M21, we got a chance for them to be good again.
Yeah, finally, huh?
All right, we'll see. Maybe. I have no idea, Corey. Maybe you're right. Cedric, how about you?
Does Corey's prediction, is that get a mythic, or how does that work? A bold prediction there? Big, okay.
I've never gotten a mythic, Cedric, never.
That's true. I mean, naturally, over the past handful of weeks of doing the show, everybody knows that I love a good monocolored aggressive deck, and I do agree with Corey in some capacity there, insofar as I do think that low-to-the-ground strategies can work both now and with the introduction of M21. I know that the aggressive decks that were monocolored, mono green, mono red, they weren't putting up the best numbers in the world. Mono green was starting to establish itself, but that format's done. Core Set 2021 is here in a couple of days. Now, I don't think that deck gets appreciably better, but I do think some monocolored aggressive decks do, and I think that's a great place to start because guess what? Your lands always work, and I'm a big fan of that.
Oh, that's a great point. Riley, for you, what does the future hold here with the release of M21?
I'm a little less optimistic about M21 for a couple of reasons. Historically speaking, an eighth set released in the just before rotation doesn't tend to impact standard hugely. There are a couple of exceptions to this. We've seen some high impact core set cards, and M21 does have a few bangers, but broadly speaking, I don't think people should be out there trying to reinvent the wheel. I think we've already got a very established hierarchy of different archetypes in standard. I think these decks have proven themselves over months and months and months, years in some cases. And so what I think you should look at M21 is as a way to perhaps augment or power up existing archetypes. As someone who likes to build silly rogue decks, as someone who likes to try new brews, I'm going to be there. I'm going to be trying to make all the various new cool mythics and build around uncommons. I'm going to try to make them work. But if you're looking for success, you should be taking what you've already been doing and seeing if it can be augmented in some way or another. A good example here is Temur Reclamation, which took Shark Typhoon and Ketria Trio and nothing else from Ikoria. It didn't try to reinvent itself. It just augmented itself a little bit. Whatever deck you're playing, look through the M21 gallery, find what cards may or may not be useful in making it better, and don't fall into the trap of having to play things because they're new. M21 is going to make a change. There's no doubt about that, but it's not going to be a complete upheaval. It's going to be a refreshment of the standard format. So I'm going to play it a little more cautiously this time around, and again, as I said, not try to reinvent the wheel with Core Set 2021.
Well, we've all been given the task here of kind of throwing caution to the wind for this next segment, where we're going to talk about some M21 deck lists that we've been brewing up, or that we've seen people start to be brewing up, and just see, what if, we play with some of these new cards in an entirely new way and just see what happens. Maybe these decks will be a bust, maybe these decks will be a win, but they are certainly a jumping off point to kind of get excited about M21 and take a look at some new possibilities out there. And the first one I'm going to talk about is one I'm bringing to the table here that I built with my friend Chuck, and of course I built a Cats deck. Hello.
Yeah, you love to
I've
see
been
it.
talking
You
it on the
love
show.
to see it.
And Ridden Sari, great card for Commander, of course, but here in Standard, you've got to make a choice. You're going to play dogs, you're going to play cats. And there's not enough dogs, quite frankly, and also I'm a cat person, so I'm going to pick cats. And there's a lot of really cool cats in Standard right now. You get to play Feline Sovereign, which is your cat lord, which of course goes with Rin and Sari. You get to play Necropanther, which is really good with this deck, and Cub Warden plus Huntmaster Liger. A lot of really cool mutate stuff going on there. Speaking of cool mutate, hello Snapdax, Apex of the Hunt. If you've ever cast that, you're having the best day of your life. I just think this is a super fun deck. Look, is it really competitive? No, but is it super fun? Yes. You also get to play stuff like Mythos of Nethroi, which is an amazing removal spell, Heroic Intervention to help save your little kitty cats from sweepers, and you've got a really cool search spell in Track Down as well, new with M21. So I'm here for this deck. I'm definitely going to try it. I'm definitely going to have fun with it. And isn't in the end that the point of Magic, right? And playing with kitty cats too. So I'm super excited to try this one out.
Maria, this deck sounds perfect.
Oh boy.
Maria, you always get onto the Twitter.
Fruit, but just fruit that's been buried several meters underground, Corey. But
okay. To be fair, Maria always makes it to the Twitter preview clips. I wanna get my bad pun there for a change here.
All right, you got it, buddy. Cedric, you've got a deck here that might be a little bit more standard viable. What have you brought for us this week?
Well, Maria, I know you've dabbled in mono black aggressive strategies, as have many people climbing the ladder on Arena, but it just was coming up a little bit short, and definitely with the change of the companion rule made Obosh significantly worse. However, my good friend and Pro Tour Amonkhet champion Jerry Thompson put forward a mono black aggro deck list last week that I was particularly fond of. Now, as I've mentioned, I love monocolor strategies because your lands always work. You get access to Castle Lockbane in case the games are going to go long, but you get some new cards that are actually quite impressive to go along with the deck. Already had plenty of good 1 and 2 mana spells, but Kitesail Freebooter is a huge addition to the deck to be able to grab a copy of Wilderness Reclamation, heck, a Growth Spiral on the play, something like that, or it can of course take Expansion Explosion. It's got a lot of targets against a lot of different decks. You get Eliminate, which is a great new removal spell against planeswalkers and creatures alike, and then Demonic Embrace is also a hefty new addition that can help you close games out very quickly in combination with Rotting Regisaur, which, oh by the way, you are going to play a lot of copies of because it's very good in the metagame. So if you're looking for the best 7/6 dinosaur deck, this might be it. Obviously, it's pretty early, but I think it's a pretty good place to start. And again, all your lands work, which I'm particularly fond of.
Yeah, I'm excited to try this deck out. Thank you so much for bringing it. Riley, you've brought some spice here. I mean, Ugin, the Spirit Dragon, hello, you're back in Standard. What have you brought?
Mate. I mean, that's all I want to do, right? Is just cast 8 drops on like turn 4 or turn 5, and that's all I'm going to try to do. I talked before about not reinventing the wheel. Well, I mean, this isn't really the wheel. I think we're kind of going back to like, the rollers they used to put under blocks of stone. It's not really a wheel. It doesn't have any axles. It's just a very bad deck that I'm going to have a lot of fun playing. Turbo Ugin. All these cards want to do is ramp out your mana and get to casting the Spirit Dragon. There are some cards that are tried and tested, 2-drop Mana Dorks, Nissa, Beanstalk Giant. We've seen these ones, but the cards that I talked about being excited for on M21, they're all here. Azusa, Solemn Simulacrum, Ugin, Cultivate, right? Fixes us for red so we can cast Escape to the Wilds. And as a result, 27 lands. And I might even look to get that higher given we have Azusa. Cultivate and Escape to the Wilds. You always want to be able to have a bunch of lands to put into play here. So I don't think this deck is going to be very good, but it's going to be so sweet to play Ugin and down tick and destroy. I mean, yes, my own Mana Dork's true, but doesn't destroy Solemn, doesn't exile the lands that Nissa makes either. So I think I think if you can pull off an early Ugin, you're going to be way ahead. It's just whether it comes together. But look, that's not the point. Ramping out massive threats is exactly what I love to do. So this is going to be the first very, very silly thing that I try.
All right, how about you, Corey? What have you brought?
So the deck that I brought is green-white Scales, called Scales because it has a hardened Scales-like effect. For anybody who remembers that deck here in Modern and Pioneer, the cool things that you can do is go like Pelt Collector into Conclave Mentor and then automatically have a 3/3. Okay, and that's one of the very small interactions that you can do with this deck. What this deck is really doing is kind of combining the power of the mono green aggro deck that we're seeing right now, put up some good results. I mean, even if Cedric can win with this deck, the power of mono green has to be there. So
he's right,
Wow.
Hey, throwing some shade, but Cedric has picked a good deck and actually has put up some good results. So I'll stop poking fun here. Definitely did better than me at the Pro Tour and this last SCG event. So I gotta actually just shut up on that one. So. But the thing I love about this deck is it's combining that power from mono green and the power from these white aggressive decks that we've had and see do really good things in Standard before with Venerated Loxodon. You get to just have these absurd draws where you can go Pelt Collector into Conclave Mentor, into like Stonecoil Serpent, doubles the counters, tap them all sideways, put Venerated Loxodon into play, and just get an absurd amount of counters. Now, normally, one of the biggest weaknesses to this deck is just Wrath of God effects, and we are still going to see those in the metagame in the form of like Bant ramp decks that are going to just get functional upgrades. So that has been a struggle, but now we have an awesome Planeswalker in the form of Garruk Unleashed, and we have a way to kind of protect your creatures in Unbreakable formation or Heroic Intervention, whatever you choose there, to be able to sidestep that problem that these type of decks that want to go wide and put a lot of counters on stuff have notoriously struggled against. So I think this deck, if it's fast enough to compete with Temur Reclamation, I think it's going to have a good place in the metagame, or it at least is going to be super fun.
All right, well, we'll see what happens. Let's head to the ladder, everybody, and find out if our decks are actually any good. If you've got some cool brews, let us know in the comments too. We would love to see them. And yeah, super excited for the addition of M21.
It is time, my friends, for one last look at our bold predictions. We are going to crown a champion here as well after weeks and weeks of making all sorts of prognostications about what the future will hold. We're going to figure out who was the very best at it, and of course, most importantly, who was the worst. Let's have a look at the predictions from last week, first of all, because we've got to get across them. We'll start with the prediction that Corbin made, and now Corey, you're going to have to face the music for what Corbin had to say for himself last week. He said that there would be a companion deck in each top 8. Now, if he had said there would just be 2 companion decks in the 2 top 8s, he would have nailed it. But because he made that really very bold and very exciting stipulation, it's an uncommon for you, my friend. Orzhov Yorion and Rakdos Sacrifice Gigantha in PT3's top 8, but no companion decks in the second top 8. So unfortunately for you, mate, only 50 with a 50% success, it's not going to be good enough. It's not going to be good enough, and so an uncommon, which is honestly better than you usually get. So maybe you shouldn't be,
Yeah, we didn't exactly nail it this time, but you know what? I think we were the team that stuck to the bold predictions the most. Everyone's playing it safe or pulling Bartholdi's, we were trying to be as bold as possible, but we just didn't hit the mark too often or at all.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can definitely relate to that because I didn't do too well this week either. I just ran back my prediction from last week, and honestly, I did a little bit better. I said last week that there were going to be 25% of the top 16 decks in both PTs were going to feature Embercleave. I was halfway there. It was 12.5%. It wasn't 25%. So with a 50% accuracy rating, I also get an uncommon there. So look, fair dues. I'll take it. Cedric did a little better. Cedric, last week you said that there were going to be 16 copies of Rotting Regisaur in the combined top 8s of the event. There were 12 at the end of PT3, so you must have just been jumping around, high-fiving everyone in the room, got this one in the bag.
Really good. Yep.
Really good, right? Good. And then 0 in PT4. So 75% accuracy, though. That's good for a rare rating. And look, you got to be happy with that.
On the whole, I'm pretty happy with that. I would consider Corey, to push back a little bit, to try to guess the exact number of a card in the top 8 is fairly bold, man. Okay, so
Cedric, you don't have to worry about it. It's just loser talk. That's all it is. It's just loser talk. He's lashing out. He's lashing out a bitterness. That's all it is. Anyway, Maria, actually, mate, you did an incredible job once again here with what is definitely, undoubtedly, a bold prediction. You said Sacrifice decks will win both Pro Tours, Players Tours, last weekend. You said that Temur would win both Players Tours. You were absolutely right. This week, both Sacrifice decks would. I mean, the boldness, fantastic. The accuracy, well, 50% ain't bad. And apparently this 50%, given the boldness of the prediction, is good enough for a rare rating for you. So you must be thrilled
you know
with
what?
that.
After Players Tour 3, Rakdos Sacrifice, a Sacrifice deck taking that tournament down, I was like, all right, we're doing it again, Mythic, 2 weeks in a row.
Here it comes.
But not a single Sacrifice deck found its way into the top 8 of Players Tour 4, so I didn't, I mean, wait, hold on, is that right? It didn't make it to did not even get in the top 8.
No, if it would have, I would have gotten there.
Oh yeah, you're right.
So
yeah, because it would have been all Rotting Regis. Yeah.
Hey, that's saying all the Rakdos decks would play Rotting Regisaur, Cedric. You never know. They could not play the best card against the metagame. You never know.
Yeah.
In any case, Cedric the rare, Maria with a rare, and Corey and I with uncommons respectively. And this brings us rather neatly to the final scoreboard. And of course, the most important thing to note now as we look at this scoreboard is the fact that Corey and Corbin absolutely stuffed it up beyond belief. 3 commons, 2 uncommons, and a rare. Wow, you hate to see it. Well, you don't. You love to see it. We love to see it. Presumably, they hate to see it. Corey, what have you got to say for yourself after this abysmal performance, mate?
Well, you know what? To start this show, I talked a lot of trash. I tried to talk the talk, and in the end, I couldn't walk the walk, so you know what? I'll put my tail between my legs. I'll, accept this last place, and I am gonna make a bold. I'm gonna make a bold prediction that the next time I am offered a bold prediction competition, I'm gonna take it down.
Yeah.
Cedric's gonna take last.
Okay, all right. That's a little better. I wasn't enjoying that gracious loser energy, to be honest. That wasn't suiting me really well. I wanted a bit of aggro. I wanted a bit of bitterness, and so now I guess I'll provide
it the way we wanted. Yeah.
Listen. I got robbed. Let me just make that very clear. I came in third. I got 3 uncommons, 2 commons, and a mythic. And let me just say that I got robbed. Like, if you go back, there's clearly... I don't want to blame it on anyone in particular. I don't want to blame it in any kind of, sort of overarching conspiracy that was white-hatting me from the inside. But I just want to say, I want to make it very clear that I got robbed. And Maria and Cedric, who beat me, you guys, I don't know who you paid off. I don't know whose palms you greased. But I tell you what, it was a good investment because I once again, let me make it clear, I got robbed. I think we can all agree on that. Anyway, at the top end of town must be very nice.
Can we just say that this was your tail's end? Can we just say that this was your tail's end here for bold predictions?
There you go. That's a good one.
Yeah, that's very good, I suppose. Anyway, at the top end of town, with a few stinkers, but a few absolute genius moments of insight. Maria Bartholdi, 2 commons, an uncommon, 2 rares, and a mythic, getting all the way to a mythic there last week as well. But what really makes your performance such a standout one, Maria, is the classic, the Bartholdi. You made predictions that came true a week ahead of their time. You gazed too deep into the crystal ball.
I know, right? It's hard sometimes to be this good at knowing exactly what's going to happen.
Oh. you powered up your prognostication ability. You didn't set the alarm at the right time. You went a little bit too far in the future. But a second place finish in most parts of the world is obviously something to be very proud of. In Australia, we call we don't call it a second place, a runner-up. We call them the first loser. So congratulations, Maria, on being the first loser here for our bold predictions. And this means the winner is, of course, Cedric Phillips. Congratulations, mate. Consistency was really what set you apart from the competition. So, Cedric, what was it? Was it an unrivaled understanding of the metagame, or did you just pay off our producer? We all want to know.
Well, I gotta say, not to toot my own horn here, but to loot, because not only did I win this, but I did it without being here for one of the weeks.
You skipped a week too.
Which is, you should all be embarrassed. You should all be embarrassed.
I
gave you
a
free week in the middle, and I still won. Now, as far as how I did it, well, there's a lot of people to thank, mostly myself. But what I will say is those 10-5 finishes that I've accumulated at Grand Prix, it really came into play here, where it's like, I'm really good at doing just enough, but not a ton. But here... my competition just didn't really show up the way they normally do at GPs. So someone had to win. Yeah. Someone had to win.
So just turning up and signing your name at the top of the form was enough. Yeah. All right. Okay.
I'm glad you're still humble, Cedric. I'm glad you're still humble.
When our producer starts posting Instagram shots sailing across the Pacific on a new luxury yacht, we will all understand exactly what went on here. Cedric Phillips, the architect of this, inside job rigged, disgusting, disgraceful. No, look, well done, Cedric. And you know what? At the end of the day, it's important to remember that we're all winners for having taken part. It's just that some of us win a little bit more than other people. Those are the bold predictions. And look, if I've got anything to say about it, you can expect to see bold predictions on this sort of thing in the future. We do hope we haven't seen the last of the bold predictions because, Maria, it has been a lot of fun to pop our prognostication.
Yeah, this has been awesome hanging out with you guys every single week. And this is the last episode of the Advantage Bar, and I just want to thank all of you for coming on here and hanging out, and of course Corbin as well, and talking Standard every single week. It's been an absolute blast. And even though this is the last episode of the Advantage Bar, it doesn't mean you can't expect more VOD content from Wizards of the Coast. And actually, we want to know from you down in the comments what you liked about the show and what you'd like to see more of as far as VOD content is concerned in the future, because there is going to be more leading up, of course, to the Players Tour Finals and the Mythic Invitational over the next 2 months. So just let us know what you'd like to see, what you liked from this show. And if the answer is all of us, well, you're right, first of all, and thank you. Thanks, everybody, for hanging out every week with us. It's been so great to be here with you, and we can't wait to see you around town virtually for all these tournaments coming up. It's going to be an absolute blast. Thank you, everyone, for watching The Advantage Bar, and remember to always push your advantage.